Thousands of years ago, the area's native people inhabited Antelope Island. Some of their prehistoric artifacts have been found at the ranch. In modern times, the ranch house is the oldest Anglo building still standing on its original foundation in Utah. Fielding Garr Ranch is located at Garr Springs. Indigenous people and wildlife used this water source long before Fielding Garr built the ranch. The first permanent structure at this site was a small log cabin built in 1848 by Fielding Garr. Garr had been assigned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS Church, to establish a ranch on the island as a stronghold for managing the church tithing herds. Like other ranches around the West, the Garr Ranch had need for a small blacksmith shop. Originally built in the 1880s, the shop allowed early ranchers to make various tools and repair them as needed: branding irons, tongs, gate latches, hinges, and repairs of all kinds. Another important function of the blacksmith shop was farrier work, the shoeing of horses. On the north wall of the blacksmith shop, you can see a horseshoe in its different stages of creation. When sheep ranching became unprofitable in the 1950s due to a failing wool market, the operation turned again to cattle. The island ranch continued to function as part of one of the largest commercial cattle operations in the state until the island became a state park in 1981. Within 2 years, Garr had expanded the ranch compound to include the adobe ranch house and other outbuildings. The ranch was continually inhabited from that time until 1981. The LDS Church operated the ranch until the mid-1870s. During this era, ranching operations encompassed the entire island. In 1869, the railroad came to Utah, and with it came the first federal surveys of the land. The ranching operation continued uninterrupted through several owners. Just after the turn of the 20th century, the focus of the ranch turned to sheep. Under the direction of John Dooley Jr., the sheep operation expanded to more than 10,000 sheep to become one of the largest and most industrialized ranching efforts in the western United States. This wagon, called a sheep camp, played an important part in sheep ranching in the West. The sheep camp traveled with the herds from summer range to winter range. This wagon carried the herder's bed and personal items, as well as food and cooking utensils. From its looks, it is apparent that long ago the wagon was pulled by horses and had a canvas cover. Over the years, sheep camps have evolved so that today they look entirely different and are towed behind a truck. This room is furnished as it might have appeared in 1973. At that time, the Anschutz Land and Cattle Company had just purchased the ranch operation. The island operation was smaller than during previous years. Most of the time, there were only two people, Lester and Joanne Hunt, living on the ranch. For this reason, the kitchen resembles most other kitchens of the time, with a propane gas oven, range, and amenities such as gas, electricity, running hot water, appliances, etc. Because the only improvements on the island were around the ranch itself, the federal government opened the rest of the island to homesteading. By the turn of the century, most of the homesteaders had failed to prove their claims. John Dooley Sr., an enterprising businessman and rancher, purchased the entire island at a price of $1 million, approximately $27,800,000 in 2018, and it became the home of his Island Improvement Company. This small room served as a bedroom to several young boys over the years. Contemporary with the dining room in the 1940s, the ranch manager's 12-year-old son Max used this room. Unlike his more urban counterparts, Max worked long days with the other ranch hands, earning $1 a day. World War II had a limited impact on Max's concerns in life, as he focused on getting enough playtime in the evenings, after working on a hay rake all day. One of his favorite evening activities was to ride his horse over the hill behind the ranch to watch the setting sun. During the 1940s, this room was the center of social activity at the ranch. During the wheat harvest, more than a dozen ranch hands sat at the table for 3 meals a day. After evening meals, family members and ranch hands played Monopoly or gambled for matchsticks in a light-hearted game of poker. Although the ranch manager, Mr. Harward, went to town for supplies once or twice each month, the radio was an important source of information for those who stayed on the island. While the ranch hands might have focused on chores around the ranch during the day, each evening the battery-powered radio brought disturbing news of World War II. This room is in the oldest part of the house, built in the late 1840s. At that time, the ranch was the home of the tithing herds for the LDS Church. Furnishing in this room reflect Fielding Garr's residence. The isolation of the Mormon settlements combined with the lack of local hardwood forced them to produce a unique style of furniture. Simple lines and oversized members and joints are necessary for strength when working with the soft local pine. This living room filled social needs for Fielding Garr in the same way that the Harwards used the dining room and Joanne Hunt used the kitchen. Later occupants at the ranch used this room as a master bedroom, south bedroom. This room is also part of the original 1840s construction. Without a heat source, most activity would have taken place in the living room. The bed is almost as good as could be, with a feather tick over rope springs. This middle room represents a midpoint between the 2 other rooms. In the 1890s, management of the ranch by the LDS Church had ended, and commercial interests began. This time period represents the development of the island's other natural resources in addition to grazing land. The railroad had just come to Utah, bringing the availability of any piece of civilization previously limited by isolation. The iron bed frame, for example, might have been too much weight to have come to Utah by overland freight before the railroad. The pine dresser represents the styles still being produced by local Utah craftsmen, in spite of competition from mass-produced furniture that came with the railroad. Water evaporating from the spring gives the same effect as an evaporation cooler in your home. This building dates to the 1850s, before refrigeration became available. Early owners of the ranch used this spring house as a part of their dairy operations in order to preserve the nutritive value of milk, which was made into cheese. The cool temperatures in the spring house played a vital role in the cheese-making process. Later occupants might have used the spring house to preserve other perishables, such as meat or fresh fruits and vegetables from the orchards and gardens. Thank you, traveling friends. We will surely see each other in another video, in another memory frozen in time.